As corporate leaders decide how and where to incorporate AI in their businesses, the question is, how can they do this responsibly? Join me as we discuss topics like AI use cases, how to evaluate the ROI of AI, the environmental impact and managing that impact of AI, and so many more in this episode. Hello, Tim. Good to see you, and welcome to Truth to Impact podcast.
Nice to be here. And great to meet you, Timmy.
Good. So why don't we start with AI? What's the evolution of AI? How did we get here?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of people don't know the origins of it. So it actually came out of the 1950s and Turing, where we started doing rule-based AI with physical machines. Then we moved into machine learning, which came out of the labs through IBM. And now we've got to generative AI models, which is actually how do we use machines to learn language. And we've got to commercializing it today, which is through examples like ChatGPT.
Right. So basically starting from machine learning down to AI.
Well, actually, it's AI that was the beginning part. And then machine learning followed after, and then we got to deep learning, and then we got to generative AI. Yeah.
And how about your journey in this space?
So it's 20 years now in this space. I started out with building architectures from the ground up with databases and building on-premise solutions with servers, and then gradually moving into data centers and then building virtual environments that businesses could access and build at scale. And now obviously we have the cloud. And through that journey, it's been a combination of building things, but then evolving myself into, well, how do you think about integrating AI into your workforce, into business workflows? And now to today, which is, well, how do you think about that from an agentic AI sense, which is the new buzzword on the town at the moment.
Yeah. So what's the difference between AI agents? Because I heard there's a difference between AI agents and agentic AI. Am I correct?
That is a great question because people conflate it.
Right.
So I'll take AI agents, and there's a lot of talk on, I would say, LinkedIn at the moment, where look at all these design patterns with your LLMs, and this is how you build the agent. I think a lot of people get confused that the LLM is not the agent. It is just a guessing machine at the end of the day that is going across the internet to pull information, and then it presents back what it's been, what it's found based on what it's been asked to do through a prompt. And all that's happened really is the agent piece that's come along is we've just stuck rule-based workflow, linear workflow over the top of LLMs, and people class that as an agent because it can just plug into calendars and customer relationship management systems, links into the LLM and says, like, now use all of this information and now speed up. So that is I would say it's the human interaction in terms of that side of it. On the agentic side, we're talking about first principles, building enterprise level solutions, which is in the heart of an organization's technology stack and their data. And essentially, what an agentic system is basically code that is wrapped around an LLM. And it can be any LLM. It could even be a company has actually got their own LLM, so they don't need to use ChatGPT. They don't need to use any of the other ones. They've actually trained it themselves on their own business data, and then they have been able to scale that LLM across their business. And that's an agentic system that they could just plug into maybe a Slack interface or a Teams interface. And as long as they've got what they call a systems prompt, which is what do you want it to do in its role, and then a user prompt, ask it something, then that system starts to come alive.
Okay. So in my head, I'm thinking, so agentic AI is more around the infrastructure. Am I correct? And AI agents is more around using it as a tool.
Yeah. So both of them are agents. This is where I think people get confused. Is that the way the way I would say sort of the agentic bit is it's the heart of your business. It's you could say the technology and the enterprise architecture side. The other one is I mean the way I'll describe it is it's your low code, no code solutions, quick and dirty, stick it in, and then you get up and going, and you do. The trouble with it is it's not scalable, and anyone buying into a low code, no code will get to a certain point where they'll have to switch over and go to an enterprise architecture approach, which is, my advice to organizations is if you are going to go down the road of agents, go down the agentic system road, because you want to build up within your business's workflows and its data that lives inside your business. You don't want to it's like a sticky plaster over the top that you want to avoid. Yeah.
So in terms of what you do, how do you help your clients from an AI perspective?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have spotted very early and why Synaptic Solutions exist is that we don't talk about the AI. We actually talk about two sides of the coin, and this actually sort of links nicely to sustainability, which is what's happening for a business and what's happening in a business. So for a business, they are all about, I have investors, I have shareholders in the boardroom, I have to be showing revenue. So I'm also being asked, but you need to get AI in as well. So what we talk about first of all is what efficiencies are you trying to make, and where are the opportunities to unlock what we call latent capacity to start to release some of that time that's being wasted, that's burning into your revenue, and then how do we realize that in AI, that cost, and then within the company, it's then okay. So now we're talking about people. The challenge I think a lot of companies have that we've seen today is that there is fear mongering. Oh, I don't want to use AI; it's going to take my job.
Right.
You've got IT people going, oh, these LLMs. Oh, and hang on, we're a sovereign environment. We're not going to stick stuff through an LLM. I don't understand it because it's a black box. There's huge confusion there. But I also think there has been, the only way I can describe it is laziness occurred in companies over the last 15 years because of the hyperscaling is what I'll call it, of cloud. You must go cloud. Without asking the question, but why? Why? And so I think what we see is that there is an education piece here for executives, which is this: what is the problem you're really trying to solve on your revenue side, and your releasing of unlocking of latent capacity, and then what are you trying to do with your staff? Where are you trying to move them to release that human, I suppose, capital is what I'll call it,
Right.
to not get rid of them as members of staff, but actually go and stick them on some more of the complicated problems within your organization that are just actually the more important things you should be solving, where you've got all that talent just doing very manual tasks that AI could do.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how we approach it really when we're talking to them about it.
Right. So you basically help the executives understand where they might have the need with AI. Is that correct?
Well, actually, the leap that we talk about again is we don't mention AI. This is the thing. So because they go, well, we want AI, and we go,
Right.
well, yeah, that's the enabler. It's a tool.
So what do you do? It's more focusing on the technology that they might need.
Well, that's the enabler. What we focus on is the outcome. What is the outcome you're trying to do? Well, one side, I need to show that I'm scaling profits. I have to show it. And number two, I have to show that I'm getting AI in my business and that we are creating a competitive edge against our other competitor industries. And we've got those two things. But the real value is actually, how am I creating, as an outcome, repeatable expertise in my business? So a big problem in organizations that we've seen and over the many years, and I don't know, when you come into a new job, for an example, is knowledge bleed. So that now means that actually you don't need to invest in loads of heavy sort of cloud migration infrastructure to do huge data migrations. You don't have to hold people accountable for make sure your data is stored in before you leave your job. What you've got now is a very sort of iterative process, which is the outcome here, which is as the user uses the AI, they're storing knowledge in the agentic system. So the agentic system is a bit like a memory bank, a bit like your brain. And so it's storing long-term memory, short-term memory, and like what we're doing right now in a conversation we're having an in-the-moment conversation. That is what agentic AI can do, and that is the outcome that it is. So it's not so focused on, well, yeah, the agentic AI is the tool, right? But the outcome is actually repeatable expertise. Plus, I've released latent capacity from, well, I don't need to put my staff there. I can put them more here. And now what I've got is I've got a new commodity in my business: quality data and content that is a new strategic moat against my competitors. And I've also released money that is showing an increase in revenues because I'm not spending it on dead manual tasks. And a common one within business is actually onboarding customers, repeat contracts, researching for negotiations in sales. That could all be agentically driven because that's where a lot of companies are at the moment because of the way that we live in the world, which is SaaS-based, B2B contracting, B2C, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Let's talk about the kind of companies that need your service. So what kind of companies require your service in terms of, at what point does an executive say, you know what, this is what I want to achieve and this is how I think Tim's company can help me?
Yeah. So through our conversations with executives at the moment, the simple question that we get is, I've got to be seen doing AI.
Okay.
And that's what we're confronted with. So the first thing there really is what we do is, well, let's talk about why you think AI is the solution. Where's the pressure coming from? Generally, what we find is as I've mentioned, it comes from investors. Get it in there. Like, come on, we don't want to be a company that's not doing it. And there's panic. Why is all our competitors doing it? You need to do it. So that's a piece. The other thing is then, oh, well, you know what? My revenues are getting eaten into by about 2 to 5%. There's probably customer disgruntledness. There might have been up or down times on SLA agreements. There may have been breaches within the contract. It might sit in sales managers' heads. And then when it comes around to that renewal time of that contract, all of that has to be aggregated, put into the reports, research done by that sales manager. That time is taken away from their job and they're not making sales. So if you go up to the camp of, in the boardroom, the CEO and the CFO, why am I not making money? I'm eating into my revenue now. So one of the use cases that we've seen at the moment is actually, how do you release those inefficiencies around that research time? And could AI actually do that work of that research piece alone and prepare a negotiation strategy for my sales manager, where they send off a task and say, well, in 6 weeks' time, I've got to have a meeting with a CEO who's buying my solution. It's not been the best relationship. I need to get all the facts, but I also need some information about where their company's going. Have they merged? Have they increased their revenues? what have been the issues for where we failed them, and where do I probably need to have a bit more of a sensitive conversation? What's the order of stakeholders that I need to talk to? How do I know that this is the right order to talk to, and how would I plan that out? You could design AI to do all of that for you through the relevant prompts, send it away to actually generate perhaps a sales report, and then that goes into the inbox of the sales manager whilst they continue to keep doing their job, which is selling. And therefore, we're now not eating into the revenues of what the business is trying to turn over. And so the CEO and the CFO can, great, that is the trigger point to go, actually, have we got inefficiencies in the business, in our business workflows? That's when we can start having a conversation about, okay, well, where's it hurting? Where's it hurting the wallet now? And where's it hurting your difficult conversations with your stakeholders, your shareholders, your investors? What are the primary use cases that you see that actually, do you know what? I think that could be done with AI. I think that could be done with AI. And then we start unpacking, but why? And then we go down the very important road of, where's your data? Because it's the garbage in, garbage out problem that we don't want to create for you, because AI is heavily invested at the front end, at the very beginning of projects. But actually over time, what you want to get to is a cost margin of 0, because you don't want to keep on repeating and keep creating infrastructure. Build once, scale many is kind of the way that I say it. So it's very much driven by that conversation about where's it hurting on the money side. And then the other side of it is then back to my point around, actually, well, where are your staff? Are they, have they been put in a situation where, no fault of their own, the business has become, it's become digitally driven. It's made the staff very lazy, where they live in spreadsheets or they live in systems and they've created data silos. That is an inefficiency in itself. So where I've seen where it's gone really badly for businesses is, we'll just do a big data migration. And that's not the answer. Let's take the use cases that link to revenue and latent capacity release. Now let's look at, well, where's the data for that? And look at the common use cases that share the same data. How can we start building something at an infrastructure level that addresses 10 use cases, and start with one to pilot test that and see whether it actually works, and we can get adoption with users and start there. So that's generally sort of our starting point with it to talk about the education piece. And you'll notice that it's not all about, let's start with, well, where do you think AI is going to plug in? Because you just can't plug it in. It's not like a magic switch. And there we go. I've integrated it. It doesn't work that way.
I think that brings me to my next point in terms of the pitfalls, right? So what I get from this conversation is that AI is not always the answer. Sometimes it could be with the culture, and sometimes it could be with just the data set. How are you even getting insights from the data? So let's talk about some of the common pitfalls that you've seen from your experience.
So the common pitfalls I've seen, and it was, a recent client that I sort of said, we bought SAP, we bought ERP, we bought Salesforce, and we've done the integrations, but no one's using it.
Right.
Okay. Did you know what problem you were trying to solve and what you were trying to do with revenue? No. I was just asked to integrate AI, but I've done that and it doesn't work. And that's a very technology sort of led approach, which is, let's just buy in the latest toys and hope it works. The fundamental thing with this is that it's about change management, organizational, target operating model assessment. I always sort of say to CEOs is that, it's either use language of, what's the vision, what's the North Star, what's the last mile, where we went from here, we go to there. Okay, so if we've got that there now, that visioning, and we help executives think about framing that, right? So let's now break that all into miles. How do we build the first mile to make sure that foundation helps you build the next 10 miles, next 20 miles, next 30 miles to then get to your last mile there? And then what's the shift that needs to happen? And generally what happens is They start with, I want to build the last mile first. And that's where it all collapses. Because your people don't move with you. And they're still drowning in the BAU, and then you're telling them to use this AI, and it's just, they're overwhelmed because they're not educated and they don't know. So I do hear a lot of complaining, not another prototype and not another POC. I'm like, I get it. It feels like dead money. It feels like you're not making progress, but actually that's the most fundamental thing that you could do, because what you can do now, especially in the agentic AI space, is you can now cost model your life cycle cost model with your prototypes. And that's actually better than what you would get from a management consulting firm who would just do a pivot table and a spreadsheet. We actually do it with the technology and actually model it there and then you can actually stick it in front of the user instantly and go, what are the hurdles for adoption going to be here? So you actually get a different way of doing this now, which is, don't do all your integrations. Don't do a massive data migration. Do a prototype, cost model with it, work out where the adoption challenges are going to be. Get to that point where you've got to, now I see the adoption with my processes and people. I see actually I've now got to do a target operating model change to get to the next 10 miles. I now have to invest in infrastructure because I don't have the infrastructure for AI. That's now the investment. So now what we've done is we've taken a horizontal do everything approach and we verticalized it. And that, from my sort of experiences that I've seen, is where you see actually core business processes, workflows, however you want to describe it in businesses, scale quicker. I was actually reading a report from, I think it was PwC actually not long ago, and they said that actually probably about maybe 3% of companies at the moment are being successful with scaling generative AI.
Right.
And that's probably
That's
about,
a low. That's a low
really
percentage.
That's really low. And actually we've had AI around for, starting to go into business operations probably about 20 years now. So that's really low. And that's probably about 5, maybe 6 core workflows. But that percentage is probably your top 100 companies in the world that are probably doing that. That's not, if you peel the onion, if I go to sort of like local businesses that have scaled regionally, nowhere near. They're still trying to get their heads around CRM systems and like, should I use HubSpot? Should I use Salesforce? What's that going to cost me? Should I go to the cloud? What about all the sovereign stuff that I've got to think about? They haven't even got to that bit yet. So that's, so those are the pitfalls that I see. It's always, a lot of people laugh about it. I always say it's all about the 5 whys. Why?
Absolutely.
Why? And it's a really simple process, but I think because we're so CEOs and boardrooms are so bogged down in pressure,
right,
to just get it in there. I suppose I phrase it like I see the CEO graveyard building up. They go and go, I'll get the low code, no code solution. That's it. I've ticked the box, but not scalable.
So now let's assume you've gone through the 5 whys, and it's evident that, AI is the answer. Agentic AI, maybe I should start using the language you use as well, is the answer in terms of scaling your business and optimizing efficiency. How should the ROI be considered? And another very silent point, but I think that it's quite important, is AI comes with a lot of environmental costs. How should business leaders leverage the innovation and also look at the responsibility that comes with using AI from an environmental perspective?
I mean, this is a big question to answer for a lot of companies and also countries. How do we help businesses integrate AI into them? So I feel it's not just solely down to businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Stargate project at UAE is going to be a good reflection of this in terms of the ambition behind this. So it's going to be the first in the world computational AI hub in partnership with OpenAI. and the UAE government and the US government in terms of how do we build a huge gigawatt computational AI center that uses a balance of energy. And how do we help companies get educated through that? So it's at that national macro level. So where it's being built in Abu Dhabi will be, well, it's going to be renewables, it's going to be solar, it's going to be a bit of gas, so there's going to be a combination of things that are going on. So I think there's that education piece, first of all, in terms of actually, well, if I can't do it as a business, what if I sort of pass it into an environment at a macro level, which is going to be sovereign built? I can trust it because it's got a partnership with G42.
Right.
And also I've got what I need where I don't need to put it into my business.
Right.
And I can do that. So that helps me as a business to address the sustainability and my ROI because I can get costs from there.
Right.
And I can start working it out. Now, say that businesses don't want to do that and I want to build on premise. Actually, it's another way of doing that. So when we're looking about the ROI piece of this, it's first of all, it's where are you today in your current state with, classic MBA cash model.
Right.
Thinking, what did you learn in your MBA about cash flows, cost model life cycle, time-based activity, what's going on with what people do today and how much you're paying them to do that.
Right.
That's our baseline. Now let's start thinking about, so you want to go AI and you want to go into cloud, or maybe not into cloud. We need to calculate sovereignty, especially in these regions of the world. Everything is sovereign. Right. Okay. I still meet IT leaders. It's like, no, it's the law. It's not going in the cloud. Done. The conversation is over. So that's already the first challenge. So it's actually, well, do you fight it or do you educate internally and go, well, we're going to build in-house the AI and then we're going to use money to drive the decision because it's costing too much. So that's the first thing. Then there's subscription costs. I'm paying for other services. Maybe I'm using HubSpot for my customer relationship management system. Maybe I've got a couple of Salesforce things that I'm paying for and other subscription costs around that. So bring that in. Then I've got my consumption. This is the big one around sustainability. It's no longer about CPU. It's about GPU. It's my compute. How much am I generating in power to run my AI? And then right down to my LLMs, my Gen AI models. How much is that going to cost me in tokens? And this is where this becomes super interesting with agentic AI because you can cost model that on the fly. Whereas before, it was a spreadsheet and, well, we think it's going to be that. We'll take the total cost of ownership calculator from the Microsoft site or the AWS site and we'll work it out and we think it's going to be that. That's just not good enough for sustainability. And then the final two bits is really around, there's going to be a labor cost for actually, I've got to build it, the Gen AI solution, and then I've got to maintain it. So putting that all together, we now then get, well, here's my investment number for ROI. It's going to cover how all of that's going to function, and that's going to help me answer my sustainability questions about how much compute. And then I've got my, well, here's my scalable profit number that's going to come out, my revenues. So now I've got the beauty here of pleasing my investors. This is what we're going to make over time. I've got new infrastructure being built. I've got cash flow that's starting to get down to zero as I start to scale. And also, I can start assessing my sustainability costs with that as well, instead of treating it as a siloed piece. Peeling the onion deeper, when we're designing the agentic AI now, we can now start addressing the people bit, which is, I've got compliance, I've got responsible AI to think about. How do I make sure my data is being used correctly? And it's got guardrails around it. And how do I just gradually make sure I'm building something with my AI that goes back to my point around building repeatable expertise in knowledge. So I'm now addressing all that on, I build a prototype in line with my cost model. So now I've got this best of both worlds where I wasn't able to achieve that before because I would have I think the classic model I've seen is I'll just bring in a consulting firm to do a full assessment and interview everyone. This is what we think. And then, here's your strategy for going and implementing your technology. Actually doing them together in parallel with each other, with the ROI, with the sustainability and the prototyping and my change management is how I'd be positioning with the executives, because they can answer all those questions in one go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that it's not just ROI from a financial perspective of my revenues, my cost, but also consider environmental costs and also consider your change management and how your process is going to be done. So it's not just, get your consultants, what's the next thing, but you've got to be deeply involved in this, right?
And of course, why do we think that way? Because we've always built a world that's linear.
Yeah.
The fundamental difference that I think a lot of people don't realize about generative AI is that it is what we call is non-deterministic. What goes in is not what's going to come out. Whereas, and I kind of break it down with AI 1.0, AI 2.0, which is our Gen AI. AI 1.0 was, well, what you put in is what you're going to get out. So So that linear-based kind of thinking works. In the generative AI world, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's a machine now that's doing things. You're asking it to go away and do things. Well, it'll go away and do it. You don't know when it's going to do it, but it will do it.
Right.
So that's uncontrollable. So that's why it's really important to ROI model sustainability at that point there.
Right.
Because your agentic AI solution is going to be a bit out of control within guardrails, but you need to be able to model that cost. And if you can take it right down to, well, this is the compute it's going to use, and this is the LLM cost that it's running on, then you're going to be in a better position for understanding sustainability from a cost perspective and an environmental perspective.
Right. So you already said talking about practical ways to reduce the environmental impact of AI. So for example, I would use the word collocating, which is what the telecoms guys use a lot with the masts. And just get different companies, instead of everybody building a mast, we can all just collocate. And you gave the example of Stargate, for example. So as a company, instead of setting up my own AI infrastructure, I can basically use or leverage the same facility in Stargate. I believe if that opportunity is available. So that could be one way. So instead of everybody building their infrastructure, we all can collocate using the sovereign infrastructure. Are there other ways you can practically reduce the environmental impact of AI?
There is. It's costly to a business. What you could do is you could go, do you know what? I'm not going to use cloud. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to build my own LLM, and I'm going to train it myself in my business, and I'm going to manage costs that way, and I'm going to keep it on-prem.
So it's costly initially, but over time?
But it will be richer as well, because what you're developing is a new commodity, which is knowledge as a commodity. And it's your LLM that's trained on your business.
Right.
So there's simple ways of doing this, which is basically, I'm building the cloud in my own business. I've got my business is cloud, but it's within what we call it the wall garden of a business's data is basically how we call it. I can build that infrastructure. The heavy cost is going to be the infrastructure,
right?
Because I'm now not paying for a cloud provider or the Stargate solution that's being built. That's going to be a higher cost. So we need to just recognize that in the boardroom. That's going to be a higher cost. But sustainably, that's better for us.
Right.
Because we're in control now of what we turn on and what we turn off. In the cloud environments, everything's turned on. And I use the analogy, you wouldn't leave your home leaving all the lights on.
Right.
That's generally what happens in the cloud, unless you know that, okay, well, by default, what's switched on, I need to turn that off.
Right.
Some good examples of that are serverless solutions, which is basically I run the code, it turns on my system, it runs, it finishes, it turns off. I'm done. I'm not burning energy. Internal to a business, I only run my sandboxes to do testing when I need them. I turn them off when I finish using them. I only use my development environments when I need them. I turn them off when I finish them. So I'm more in control. But the LLM piece is, well, we've got lots of open source LLMs now through places called Hugging Face. I can download my models from there, and they might, I don't know, they might have something like millions worth of things that we call parameters. But I don't need millions. I need hundreds of thousands. So what I'll do is I'll retrain my model overnight.
Right.
Because that's the reduced amount of energy that I'm using. Or maybe I use somewhere that's got a renewable energy supply and a grid.
Right.
So I'll train it using renewable energy. I've trained my model. I stick it in the heart of my business, in my infrastructure. And then I just build my business processes around it, wrap my code around it with Agentics. And then actually what I don't need is I don't need a huge curation and ingestion system now for data because I've got my Agentic solution and it's got a memory-based system.
Right.
And I'm in control of it. I actually believe that if you went down that road, you would probably, it's just a bit of thought leadership now. This is why you see the CEO of Microsoft going, the SaaS model is dead. That's what will kill the SaaS model.
Right.
Because then you don't need to use things like Salesforce. You don't need to use things like HubSpot because all the data's in the business, and I've got my own LLM. So why do I need to use you?
Right. So, Tim, how do we ensure data integrity, ethics, and governance in AI? Because it all comes from the data that is fed into AI. So how do we ensure all of that?
Yeah. Again, another big question that sits in the boardroom. How do we do this? This really does come down to, it is a top-down answer to it. It's learning though from what are we doing bottom up with where all the mistakes are happening with ethics, diversity, bias. How are people making decisions with data? How are they assessing, well, is that good data? Is that good quality? I've seen this in a couple of companies that I've worked in now, which but we must get data quality in there. We must get people thinking about that. There must be a data steward and a data owner. You talk to the staff, what does that mean? They don't understand. So the first thing really, and I would say now for executives, is start talking about responsible AI now. And actually the responsibility comes from how are you looking after your data? Make it a conversation. Lunch and learns, town meetings, little sessions that get run by champions in the business who then have those networks into those deep siloed domains of data.
Right.
And make them coaches and leaders and mentors of this. And that's change management. That's about education piece there. And that would be the first building block.
Right.
The next bit then is actually, well, businesses change and shift, and they change and shift with technology. They change and shift with data. They change and shift with competitor landscapes and models. So how do we codify this in such a way where people continually keep upskilling and they don't forget that they've got to be responsible, data's got to be governed?
Right.
The only way that I've seen this work is that if you codify at source within business processes and you create business process owners who are solely responsible for data quality within their business unit.
Right.
And then you create a cascading model from maybe like, a classic management consulting hub and spoke kind of thing. Everything happens from the executive room. This is globally how everyone should be doing it. We recognize locally there'll be different laws if they're a global organization. We need to be making sure that these are the hard and fast guardrail rules for compliance and governance. This has to be codified at a master level. It can't be changed. It can only be authorized change from the executive suite. That is then copied down into local regional businesses, and then they are allowed to model off of that and then build whatever they need to build within the context of their own region.
Right.
And then a quality process is then wrapped around it. And I tend to treat that like risk management. It's a risk management.
Absolutely. Because as we're talking, I was like, it's understanding the risk and the data risk, creating a process, looking at the controls and doing a quality check from time to time. And, what also came to my mind is just like you have HR partners across different units in an organization, it might be important to also have your IT partners across. So see our IT
So
champions.
that is a really interesting one because I have a different view on really how this works, and I think a lot of the CTOs in the room will probably they'll be shaking their heads right now. Is that from what I've learned over the sort of 20 years of how people approach data migration projects, the biggest bottlenecks have been IT. No, you can't do that, security and privacy. If we think about what the role of IT is, it's basically the outcome I want from you is I want a container that can store data that has all of the necessary security and compliance and privacy policies codified around the environments that you build. And then I want to be given the tools to be able to build data quality controls within and around my data. It's the CIO's responsibility with how data is governed and how it is being built within business units and how it is being used. But the two often get conflated, and the IT hand goes up and goes, no, that is our problem as well. We will solve that. It's one that I think we're still on a maturity journey with at the moment, because we've always associated with, where we've come in the world is it's an IT problem.
Right.
That's it, literally IT. But because we're now creating, I call it like a commodity to a business, which is a data asset, it's changing. It doesn't have to solely be on IT linear driven rules. It's like go build me the prison that has got the rules in and everything like that, and we will bring in where people need to go because we've got those constraints. It's the same with data. Go build me that environment. Now I can use that environment with data, and if I breach, please come in and give me the reports and the issues. It's not a slap on the wrist. We'll do our risk assessment, we'll put in the mitigation, and then we will then roll that out into a standard operating procedure, and then we'll help educate people about what they can and cannot do. But also the reciprocal needs to be listened to. Our business model is changing. Our customers are changing. Our IT environments need to change. Can we do this? Can we not do this? What does regulation say? So it's a bit of a fine balance, really. And I feel at the moment, generally there's a lot more power in the IT camp at the moment, and this is what stifles innovation because of the compliance, regulation. But it's actually just a constraint at the end of the day. It shouldn't be used to stifle innovation.
Right.
And I think this is what stifles a lot of business models because they are, it's compliance says no. And I've worked in healthcare and life science, and I've been at the end of that. It's like, but let's just take a step back and think about the questions that we're trying to answer and look at those as rules. What can we do? What can't we do? What permission do we need to seek? How do we need to do that? And then eventually, when you sort of bring people on that journey, you go, oh yeah, no, we can analyze the data, we can mask it, we can now do this with it. As long as this happens, and that is changing in standard operating procedure.
Right. So let me rephrase this a bit, because my background is in audit, and you want the IT champions to be the gatekeepers and not to be the ones in the process. Is that what I hear?
Yeah.
So you could have your data champions or information champions do the work, and you have your IT champions as the gatekeepers, because so those are like your check and balance, but they are not in the key process, because the possibility is that they might stifle innovation.
Yeah, and I've had it before with like a head of IT is that I want to know how you're building your data model. And I'm like, I don't think that's necessary.
Right.
I think what you just need to know is, are we complying with your security and compliance and your privacy rules? And this is how we're doing that.
So let's move on to the next question in terms of upskilling the workforce. So there's been a lot of fear, AI, or even I don't even know what this is about. I don't know how this integrates with my work. How should organizations upskill their workforce in AI?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I kind of look at, certainly through the conversations like me having with executives at the moment, is that a lot of people got ostrich fever. I'll stick my head in the sand. I'll do it when everyone else has done it. We're now shutting the business
And I'll
down.
be the first.
Yeah, we can't be the first. We can't be the only doctor. So I'm a huge advocate of actually little innovation projects and things like that, as long as it doesn't sort of mess with the BAU, encouraging staff to take a risk with experimentation, but doing it sensibly. And what I mean by that is, do you know what? Coming in and saying, first of all, do you know what? I want to have an AI community here for members of staff. May I please have permission to start that up? May I please have some time to take away from their work, or can I please have a little bit of money to buy some lunch and things like that to bring people in and have a bit of a conversation? And what executives want to create in a company is, well, let me tell you what hasn't worked. Here's the stick, you go and do it. Generally doesn't work. Unless you're in a heavily regulated industry like finance, healthcare, and life science, generally that kind of, well, you've got no choice, you've got to do it. But still you can innovate off of that, and having worked in hospitals, there is a way of doing it. But essentially, if you give this, what you're trying to do as an executive is you want to create a movement. A movement of people are allowed to do something without having to ask for permission. They don't have to apologize for mistakes.
Right.
And I think this is where, like, true leaders in the boardroom are, I want my staff innovating. I want them taking risks within reason, because I need to get to this last mile. And it all comes down to people. So if I give them the power to have autonomy, to think about this, and we get to the point of people feel comfortable with it, what's probably going to happen then is, I want to start playing around with this. I want to start using this. May I please come to you with a business case to try this technology? Because it's AI, because people are aware now. And can I do this around this little low risk area where I don't think it's going to hurt the business? And can I use it as a case study in the business to show, look at what we did in here. We can educate you about, these are all the concerns. Because what you want to get to is earning trust. And this is what will break down that it's going to take my job away, because it's not going to take your job away. All it's going to do is evolve you. And that's where, that is generally where community in businesses really, really works. And it's not all just about the day job. It's about my commodity, which is my people, have now come on a journey rather than being told top down, go do the digital transformation. And we'll change the first few layers. The rest of you go work it out, which is generally what I've seen. And only in certain cultures where they've got this very sort of, peculiar startup culture, where I see it sort of operate differently, because they're allowed to autonomy and all like that. And I think, if you approach it that way as an executive, there's a bit of risk there, which is, I live in a hierarchy model business. What's the harm in actually letting people actually have a bit of a voice around, these are my fears, these are my concerns? And more often than not, having worked actually more sort of around in the healthcare, life science, the heavily regulated Swiss space, computational AI hub, basically, which is going to help with AI research and development. It's going to be powered off of multiple different sources of energy, which is solar, renewable. It's going to have some gas. And where I sort of see it in terms of its innovation is it's going to help accelerate AI into businesses. So I kind of describe it as, it's the bit that's going to sit on top of the internet now. So everyone's got their web pages now. Now let's get everyone getting onto AI. So I think what it's going to do is it's going to accelerate, where I use the analogy of, way back 25 years ago, everyone was like, what's this e-commerce thing? Oh, do I need a website? I'll get a website. There wasn't the technology around then until Microsoft pulled out ASP.NET that allowed people to create dynamic websites. I see the same thing happening here now with Stargate, which is, okay, people are going to need compute. They're going to need Gen AI. Where can we take them to where they can plug in, a bit like building a website for their company, where they can now build a generative AI into their business workflows? that's the opportunity that I see. But also it's going to be reciprocated. UAE is going to invest in the USA as well in terms of AI infrastructure from the learnings of it, which is great. But I think the bigger macro thing here that we will learn from it is, here's a blueprint for the rest of the world. How do you go about building these solutions that can scale quickly in countries? And I think, the first thing that sort of comes to a lot of people's mind that I've sort of been talking about, the electricity is going to be enormous. We're going to drain a lot of things here. Yes, it's going to do that. But let's look at it on the other side of the fence is, well, what if we're building this thing to design ourselves out of high energy consumption? What can we use with that power now to get us away completely from natural resources? Could that hold the key to the answer of, here's how we build this 100% renewable? And that then trickles down the pyramid to businesses and go, you're 100% renewable with your AI because we built an AI, big giga AI hub that allows you, one, to scale your business with AI, but also you're sustainable. So I think that's the opportunities that this brings.
Right. Now let's talk about the future. So I was watching a documentary recently, and I was a bit surprised when, Apple was referred to as a legacy tech because it's been there for about 10 years.
Yeah.
I guess when we look forward a bit, we would look back and say AI is a legacy tech at some point. What are the things that, in your mind, we should expect
Yeah.
in the future?
So I'm gonna lean on actually like the mission of Stargate, actually, because I've been quite fascinated about what's behind it, and it's the origin of a culture. What I love about the UAE and the part of the Middle East is that there's no fear of experimenting. Let's innovate, let's see what happens, and don't be ashamed if you fail, because then we can learn what doesn't work, and then we can actually use that to learn from, to build what actually is going to be successful. And that's a very startup entrepreneurial culture. And I can see now why a lot of people sort of want to. I have to see why the talent's moving in here now to do it. So I do see going forward in the future that we will see a shift of changing world order, is kind of what I call it, which is like people will start to gravitate over to this side of the world, because the way in which the economy is being designed is, it's okay to make a mistake. Yeah, there's a cost to it, but you know what? We're refeeding that back in to think about, well, how do we get to scale? Because one of the biggest things at the moment that I think is coming, that needs to come in the future is, okay, so I've done my POCs and I've done my prototypes, but how do I scale this? No one can answer this question at the moment. And I think what will come with that is actually a couple of things from the learnings of Stargate, is that this is, UAE and some of the other countries in the Middle East we build for sovereignty. Well, how do I build for sovereignty in my business? Because I don't want my data going out on the internet. The true success of LLM, in my opinion, is basically the data that lives in the wall garden of companies. That's where the power is of where this can really go. I also see today's LLMs, they won't be tomorrow's LLMs. They'll be completely different. We talk about intelligent agents that don't need the human at all now. An agent will train an agent. Will train an agent. That's coming. So what would happen if you had now businesses that were decentralized in a sovereign way, where you had businesses in sort of one industry that goes, oh, well, this industry is trying to solve what I do. Maybe I can sell the business model. Here's how you use the generative AI and the LLM I used. Why don't you buy that model from me, and you can roll that out into your business model, and you pay me for that? A completely new, different business model is coming through now. It's like, take a copy of my business through and see how it works with AI, and see if it works for you.
Right.
That's kind of how I see it going. Yeah.
Right.
Decentralized.
Right. Interesting possibilities. I think on a final note, I worry a little bit about AI in terms of the misinformation out there, the ethics around AI, and how to promote inclusiveness. Question is, what is the role? I want a world where we can, I guess at this point, we can't trust the information because there's a lot out there. You don't know what is right or what is wrong. And I think that at some point it has to be regulated. So this is not to add more layers of regulation. It's more around responsibility. So the question is, how should government, corporates, and generally everyone, how do we ensure ethical AI and AI that is inclusive?
Yeah. It's a hard one to answer really, because there's a number of ways in which you could do it. I mean, you could do out the gates of what the EU AI Act have done, which is, do you know what? If you mess up, you're fined, and it's going to hurt. Now, I think that's a bit. Yeah, that gets a message across. You know, it's like telling a child off, you're never going to do that again, and they've been really naughty. But is that the right thing to do? Because you cripple businesses and you cripple jobs. It depends on the severity of it. Right? So that's one way of educating businesses. I think the other way, it goes back to the point that I was making earlier, is that in the executive camp, whilst everything is being discussed around revenues and initial rates of return and anything to do with profitability, there needs to be a conversation around, but how are we educating our staff to be responsible? Because it's not actually the AI that's going to be the issue here. It's going to be the data, and the lies will be in the data. And, you know, the way in which we, you know, from what I've seen in the world today, there, you know, and it's a shame, but you see people who have learned how to lie in their data to get the capital gains that they want. You know, that world exists. So educating people differently and incentivizing them to say, do you know what, actually, if you don't correct your data and it misleads, then you don't get rewarded. That's one way in which you could do it, and you put some controls around it, and you incentivize around data quality rather than profits. So that is one way to tackle it, because if you develop good quality data and you get good responsible behaviors, that means you've got a good commodity to sell, and therefore people are going to trust in your data more. So therefore your profits are going to come out as a reciprocal of that. So, and I think generally, you know, it's just awareness. It's awareness of and upskilling and training and investing in the staff. Not saying go learn this technology now and then you'll be responsible, because they won't. It's just another piece of technology in the day. It's think about the ramifications of, say this is your family member and we were using their data inappropriately. Would you like that? And that destroys their career. Would you like that? Probably not. So why are we doing it to other people? So, and then it's a hard conversation to have, because you've got beating down pressure in the boardroom from investors and shareholders like, yeah, okay, all the fluffy stuff, stick it down the bottom. Values, stick it down the bottom. Like, how does that affect my profits? So it's a hard one for CEOs to juggle. But then on the other side of it is like, well, now I'm getting sued because we didn't do the ethics piece, and then all those nice profits that we've made there, that's everything. Okay, maybe another CEO next. And, you know, so it's striking the balance, and I think, you know, you've got to do these things as two tracks. Keep your investors happy, wrap that educational responsibility piece in your initiatives for doing AI, and then really it's a bit like a Catherine wheel. Just keep that going and keep your staff, and get your staff to drive it, because people and change. Create those movements.
Any final thoughts from you?
I'm excited about the opportunities actually of what's coming. We've spoken obviously a bit about Stargate. I'm interested to see what the blueprint is when they've done it.
Right.
Or actually what they learn as they go through the iterations. I would hope actually that they look at what's gone on with Neom in Saudi Arabia, and why did it not work completely the way, because it was going to be an AI city. Where were the mistakes? It's a sovereign country as well. So I would like to think that actually, can we learn from those mistakes, and actually, you know, this is the next big project. You know, can we learn from it? What did we learn? Don't do that. Do this. And can we learn to iterate? And I think the iteration piece is the critical bit, the experimentation to prototyping to, so how does that scale before we go and build the big thing? That is the exciting bit that I see, is like, how do we approach this? Because as I said, we live in a non-deterministic world. What goes in does not come out anymore. And that's really difficult to sort of work out. So that kind of, panic, so the exciting bit is, how do we get to that bit of knowing what it's going to do when we don't know what it's doing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Tim. I've really learned a lot on AI, and I'm looking forward to sharing this insights with the team as well.
Great. Lovely. Thanks very much.